In this video, we're going to be talking about the top 5 best swords for every C in Blox fruits. So if you don't want to waste your time getting weak swords, then stay tuned because this is the video for you. So starting off in the first C, we have Pipe, which is a rare sword that can be obtained from the sword dealer of the East for 100,000 money. This sword actually has quite a few pros. Both moves can hit multiple targets, making it pretty good for grinding, especially since the X move does burn damage. This sword does have some PvP potential, but there are better choices on this list. The cons does speak for itself. Moving on, we have Shark Saw. This is an uncommon sword that can be obtained from defeating the Saw boss. For just an uncommon sword, it has a lot of pros. It has great damage, good for grinding, and both moves stun, making it decent for combos. Though the moves do lack range, but next sword should fix that, which is the Bezento and its white beard sword. So you know it's strong. This is a legendary sword that can be obtained from the master sword dealer for 1 million money. This sword is good for grinding, but its PvP capabilities is what really makes this sword strong. Both moves deal high damage, good range, and good AoE. This is also one of the few swords that have a V2, which makes it even stronger. So I do recommend getting this sword, it is really strong. The next sword is the Soul Cane. This is a rare sword that can be obtained from the Living Skeleton NPC for 750,000 money. If you're a high bounty player, then you already know how strong this sword is. Both moves deal good damage, high stun, very good combo potential, and decent for grinding. Though, this sword can be hard to use, so use it at your own risk. Our final sword for the first C is the Legendary Saber. This is a legendary sword that can be obtained by completing the Saber puzzle and defeating the Saber expert, also known as Shanks. This sword is well known for being the strongest first C sword, and for good reason. This sword does surprisingly high damage for a first C sword. Both moves are really good for grinding and are very fast, making really good fast one-shot combos. Overall, this sword is very strong and versatile for a first C sword. I highly recommend using it, it is definitely worth it. Moving on to the second C. The first sword is the Gravity Cane. This is a rare sword that can be obtained from defeating the Fajidar boss. Honestly, this sword needs no introduction. With its recent rework, it's one of the most popular swords for the current PvP meta. Both moves can break instinct, good damage, and both excellent combo starters. Both moves are also pretty good for grinding, since it can hit multiple targets. Overall, this sword is an excellent choice for PvP and good for almost any build. I do suggest trying it out. The next sword is the Midnight Blade. This is a legendary sword that can be obtained for 100 ectoplasm from the Admin NPC. This is another popular sword being used for the current PvP meta, and I think I can see why. Both moves have high combo potential, both breaks instinct, good damage, and the Z move is basically just Portal Z. And both moves can hit multiple targets, making it good for grinding as well. Honestly, for how easy this sword is to get, it is very useful and just looks cool visually. The next sword is the Flaming Rengoku. This is a legendary sword that can be obtained from a secret room inside Winter Castle, which can only be accessed by getting the hidden key from defeating the Awakened Ice Admiral boss. Now, this sword is absolutely overpowered. It's so overpowered, in fact, they had to nerf it not once, but 2 times. You might be asking, what makes a legendary sword you can get in the second C so overpowered? Well, what makes it overpowered is the extremely high damage/burn damage. And what you're seeing now is the heavily nerfed damage. Before the nerf, both moves did over 7,000 damage, but after the nerf, it's still very strong. Both moves still do high damage, the X move breaks instinct and both moves do burn damage. Though, it might not be the most ideal choice for grinding because the Z move is single target, but it still can be useful because of the X move. Even though the sword got 2 nerfs, it's still very strong and I highly suggest using it in PvP. The next sword is the Dragon Trident. This is a rare sword that can be obtained from defeating the Tidekeeper boss. This is again another popular sword being used the current PvP meta. Now, this sword is just ridiculous. Both moves break instinct and have high AoE, and the X move not only stuns but has the largest AoE among all swords in the game. So you might be asking, why would the developers make a rare sword you can get in 2nd C this strong? I have no idea. But it doesn't really matter, cause everyone loves using it for PvP and grinding anyway. The final sword for the 2nd C is the true triple katana. This is a mythical sword that can be obtained by buying Wando, Shisu and Sadi from the legendary sword dealer and getting 300 mastery on all 3 swords, then buying the actual true triple katana from the mysterious man NPC. It's a pretty long obtainment method, but I'll explain why this sword is top 1 for the 2nd C. This sword is arguably the best 2nd C sword. For one, this sword does very high damage, and I mean very high damage. Both moves have a big hitbox and both do over 6,000 damage. The X move is especially overpowered. It not only breaks instinct, but it has the 2nd largest hitbox out of all swords in the game, so you low-key can't miss with this sword. But seriously, the X move is very strong, just look at that AoE. It's pretty big, right? That's what she said. If you don't have this sword, you're honestly missing out. So you should definitely get it. Moving on to the 3rd C. This is where we're going to talk about some of the strongest swords in the game. These are the swords that I think are honestly must-haves. So keep watching if you want to find out. The first sword for the 3rd C is Yama. This sword can be obtained by completing 30 Elite Hunter quests and then going to Hydra behind the waterfall and entering the secret temple where you can pull the sword out of the ground to obtain it. For a 3rd C sword, the damage is quite low, but it definitely makes up for it in other ways. For instance, both moves have high mobility and good combo potential, and both moves have decent AoE, which makes it relatively good for grinding. Considering how easy it is to get, this is a pretty good sword to use if you're just starting out in the 3rd C. But there are, of course, better choices on this list, so keep watching. The next sword is the Hallow Scythe. This is a mythical sword that can be obtained from defeating the Soul Reaper boss. This sword is actually kinda overpowered. Both moves have high damage, big hitbox, good combo potential, and great for grinding. The X move also has a mechanic where it does more damage based on how low your opponent is. Overall, this is a pretty strong sword, especially for PvP. Though, one of the main reasons why this sword is on this list is because of a specific admin killer combo that you can only do with this sword. This combo absolutely deleted Huzod's health, an admin that was level 9 billion. So if that doesn't tell you how overpowered this sword is, then I honestly don't know what will. The next sword is the Spiky Trident. This is a legendary sword that can be obtained from defeating either Cake Prince or Do King. This sword is honestly no stranger to bounty hunters. Both moves have excellent combo potential and great mobility, making it compatible with almost any build. Even with the rework of swords like Gravity Cane and Dragon Trident, Spiky Trident is still used by many, which just shows how strong it is. The next sword is the Fox Lamp. This is a legendary sword that can be obtained at a low chance by offering 15 plus embers to the Kitsune Shrine. Considering how hard this sword is to get, it definitely makes sense why it's very strong. Both moves do high damage, good combo potential, and good AoE, and the X move is also pretty good for grinding. Also, both moves may not break instinct, but they do use up basically all your instinct dodges. This sword may not have anything too special, but it's still definitely worth getting. The next sword is the Shark Anchor. This is a legendary sword that can be obtained from defeating a terror shark spawned with your monster magnet. Now, this sword is honestly no joke. Both moves break instinct, high damage, great combo potential, and good for grinding. The X move also has a special mechanic where you do more damage to larger targets and ignores some of the damage reduction of transformed beast fruit users. This sword is honestly too overpowered for just a legendary sword. It should be a mythical for how strong and unique it is. The final sword for the 3rd C is the Cursed Jewel Katana. This is a mythical sword that be obtained by obtaining Yama and Toshida and getting them both to 350 mastery and then completing the Cursed Jewel Katana puzzle. This sword truly needs no introduction, because it is arguably the most broken sword in the game. For one, this sword is the highest damaging sword in the game. Both moves do extremely high damage, break instinct, great combo potential, and good for grinding. The X move also has a special mechanic similar to Shark Anchor, where it ignores all the defensive buffs of Dragon and Buddha transformations. This sword also has the highest mobility out of all swords in the game. Honestly, this sword is just too powerful out of all the swords in this video. This is the one I definitely recommend getting the most. Well, I think that wraps up the video. Tell me what you think about my rankings of these swords down below. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, then you already know what to do.